Hi, everyone. Dr. Tracy Jones. On this tremendous leadership podcast, Leaders on Leadership, we are talking with John Solleder. John has had decades of experience in network marketing and direct sales, and we are so excited to hear his viewpoint on paying the price of leadership.
You're listening to Tremendous Leadership with Dr. Tracy Jones.
Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Tracy Jones. Welcome to the Tremendous Leadership Podcast, Leaders on Leadership, where we pull back the curtain on leadership and really go deep into what it takes for leaders to pay the price of leadership. And today, I am tremendously excited to have my dear friend, best-selling author, entrepreneur par excellence, John Solleder. And John Solleder has been a top earner in his industry for 36 years. He has held the top rank in 4 network marketing companies in that time frame. He holds the distinction of being recognized as the President's Cup winner with one company the first year of such recognition in 1992, and then having the same distinction for a second company in 2010. He has also consulted for some of the leading brands in the industry as an outside consultant. And in his personal life, he is one tough guy. He's earned his black belts in both Judo and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He also has participated in wrestling, track and field, as well as powerlifting, and has a long athletic career. So we're going to hear a lot about that grit and determination because John's also an athlete. So I am just so excited. John, thank you so much for being on my podcast.
Well, thank you, Tracy. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And John and I go back because we published John's book, his 3rd edition of his book, Moving Up 2020. And we're going to talk about that at the end as he weaves some of his leadership lessons and things like that through it. But John knew my father, and he knows what it takes to pay the price of leadership. And John, what we've been really doing on this podcast is talking with leaders to share with other leaders that are listening right now that are in the trenches. Not the theorist, not the pie in the sky, but the people really out there fighting the good fight. And it is a tough fight right now. And we want to break down the 4 prices of leadership. And I want you to share with our listeners what these mean to you. All right. So you ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So one of the first prices of leadership that my father talked about was loneliness. And we've all heard the phrase, it's lonely at the top, but loneliness means different things for different leaders. And sometimes there is just going to be a time when you are going to have to step out from the crowd and make some decisions that may not always have even your most ardent supporters all in when you first decide to make it. So John, you've grown a lot of different industries and you've been hugely successful in a really tough field for decade upon decade. How do you go out and forge the path and stand alone?
Well, I think sometimes I think I'm too naive to know how tough things are. Sometimes I think it's good not to be overwhelmingly smart. Not that I don't consider myself smart, but sometimes I think I look at problems with the idea of just how do I solve it.
Uh-huh.
And years ago, one of the guys who did some writing for Jim Rohn said, you have the ability to make something really complex sound very simple.
Mm-hmm.
And I would compare that to maybe something that George Bush, the first George Bush, said about leadership that not only is it not easy, but that it is something that you have to be able to look at the big picture and make everyone understand what the big picture is if you're going to move forward. And it was a reference he made during the Gulf War. I don't remember specifically what it was, but it was along those lines where you had this very complex situation happening. And how are you going to make it simple enough that not only we, the American people, understood it, the world understood it, our colleagues understood it, and frankly, our enemy understood it as well, and I'm not comparing myself to someone who leads people into battle. I lead them in a business battle, but sometimes I lead them in personal battles.
Right.
And I think that when you lead people into anything, whether it's that they've gotten a bad diagnosis at the doctor and they come to you as a friend, as a colleague, as an upline, as somebody that they know, somebody that I know from the sports world, for example, that knows me in a whole different life than my business life, that comes to you and confides in you that they have a situation going on in their life. how do you lead them? And how do you not be cavalier? And how do you take every situation serious and yet at the same time try to problem solve it with somebody? And sometimes, and I think this is one of the things that always frustrates me, is sometimes there is no answer.
Mm.
Sometimes the answer is that there's no answer.
Mhm.
And we in business, we always solve problems, right? And that's how we make money. That's how we achieve, right? We got to solve the problem.
Right.
And sometimes you can't solve the problem. For example, I've lost three friends this year. Three very close friends. One to cancer, one to COVID, and one just to old age. And in all three cases, there wasn't a darn thing I could do
Mm.
but pray, and obviously. And wasn't anything I could do. And I'm not used to not being able to do something. I'm not used to not being able to suggest something or have some kind of well, what about this? What about that? And that's difficult. It's really difficult as a leader because our sometimes our egos are caught up in our ability to solve other people's problems. Once again, whether they're business or personal. And when you can't, it's very, very frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you can, it's very, very satisfying.
Right.
But when you can't, you take it to heart.
Right. Well, it's interesting because you really hit on in the fact that with network direct sales and network marketing, you have to really deal with, whereas maybe in other fields of work, like where I was in more traditional brick and mortar, it was your personal life stays at home, even in a lot of the technical fields, but you're dealing with more the whole person. So you have to deal with, like you said, leading them into business battles and also dealing with, we're people and we're going through these hardships. And when you go through hardships, you feel completely alone. And that's what's really tough about this whole thing that's going on right now is people feel kind of isolated and very, very lonely and depressed and stuff like that. So it's interesting that you look at that loneliness as a leader and you see it not in yourself. I love that you say you're not. I love that because sometimes we don't want to know all the bad that's going on. Like God shields us from it. Because if I really saw how bad the mountain was, I don't think I'd make it. But a little bit of ignorance can be bliss. But I really like that you threw that in. Hey, when you decided to go into this field, tell me about how you made that decision to step out. You talk about that in the first part of your book, but tell me how you decided to change your course from your set of values and your worldview and said, hey, the entrepreneurial life is for me, and the economy, the free commerce. Talk to me about that.
Well, there's a couple of things that happen. Number one, sometimes that expression about no opportunity, you have to look at it as how do you take no opportunity and turn it to opportunity. So, for example, um, my vehicle the last 3 years that I went to university was a United States mail Jeep. Now, I don't know if you've ever been in one of these things, Tracy, or anybody else has, any of your listeners have, but here's a couple of issues. Number one, it's got one seat for the driver.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and it's got a mail rack next to it. So I never had a date in college that I could pick up and say, hey, I'm going to pick you up. I'm going to go to the movies or something. I didn't have a vehicle that would accommodate that. I was so broke because I was basically putting myself through school. I mean, at the end of the day, it was like every nickel went to tuition and books and gasoline and rent and, all the other things. So, I was one of those kids that was like, I was going to make it because I didn't really care what the issues were. I was going to make it, but I also knew I couldn't drive the Camaro that some of my friends were driving.
Mm-hmm.
That mom and dad bought them. I didn't have parents that could buy me a car. So what happened with that? That was a negative, right? The car was a negative. Little blue, really ugly little blue old mail Jeep. I bought it from the Hackensack. Ironic, I was born in Hackensack, New Jersey, and I bought it from the Hackensack post office. They used to sell these things on Saturday afternoons, and they call it a surplus sale. It was $1,000 US. So I bought this thing. And what did I do with it? A couple of things. Number one, I worked part-time as an electrician's helper. And because I did, they would let me pick up the wire and skin it, and then there was copper under it. So I could take the copper to the junkyard, and the junk man would pay me, per pound on basis of how much copper I would bring, right? So that gave me a little bit of extra money. So I turned that negative of that mail Jeep with no dates to a positive because it created some cash flow. Now, when I started my first distributorship in April of 1983, I still driving the mail Jeep. Okay, I'm still in college. I haven't graduated yet. And what happens is we start that business, right? I hear then President Reagan speak at my commencement, right? I joined the company I was with, HerbaLife International, April 18th, 1983. May 18th, 1983, 1 month later, President Reagan comes to Seton Hall to speak at my commencement. Now, at that point, let me give you a little reference point. At that point, I am a dyed-in-the-wool left-wing socialist. I believe business people are inherently bad, and that they're the man, and that they're going to find some way to take advantage of anyone who works for them. Because that's the way I was brought up. That's what I was told. And I believed it. I didn't know any better. Reagan comes, and I didn't want to go to my college commencement to begin with because it was Ronald Reagan. The union breaker, the strike breaker, the guy who was a Democrat that became a Republican, God forbid. And I don't get into politics here. I'm sure we have some of both parties listening, but and by the way, I'm not fond of either party right at the moment, so let me say that. But I think they both have lost their roots, and their minds, frankly. But all that said, when I heard President Reagan speak about a couple of things, number one, mentorship, and I said, wait a minute, he's talking about what I'm getting from this new business that I joined. I was getting mentored by my upline. I was getting mentored by the company. They were teaching me some skills about how to make money I'd never heard before. So here the President of the United States is talking, and I'm listening real first like this, all the answers and no money. And by the end, I'm leaning all the way forward in my chair. And I probably was the first one out of my chair when he was done speaking, because he was so powerful and yet gentle. If you could be both. Most powerful human being on the earth right at that time was also gentle. He was talking to my heart. He was telling me, hey, kid, you got a shot. Get mentored. Listen to these people. Now, there's 4,000 people there, by the way. But I felt like he was talking like you and I are right now. And I was way in the back, right? I wasn't up front or anything, right? And I felt like the president was talking. So when he talked about mentorship, number one. Number two, when he talked about what capitalism could do to free people and what it had already done. This is 1983, spring of 1983. So the whole Soviet Union, the Iron Empire is falling apart over there, right? With communism. And what do those people want? They want what we got that we take for granted. They want capitalism, okay? They want the ability to walk into a store and make choices, right? They want the ability, and it's a lot more than that, obviously, as you and I well know. Right. They want the ability to put $1 in their pocket for hard-earned work and get to keep it, or keep most of it anyway. Okay. And he's talking about all of these reference points that I'd never heard before. Wow. And by the end of that, I was committed. I voted for Reagan and everything else, and I became a young Reagan Republican at that point in time. Okay. But I was busy now. I had already started my first real business venture, so I didn't have time to really get caught up in politics because I'm already in action with my business. So I graduate. And as I began to construct an organization, I lived in northern New Jersey at the time. The way that company used to get us our product was they would air freight it into Newark Airport. Now, there were a lot of people about our age right now that I recruited into my organization. Some I recruited their kids, and they recruited mom and dad, or even grandma and grandpa, for example. Well, those people didn't want to truck down to Newark Airport to pick up product, right? So I took that same little ugly blue U.S. Postal Service truck, and I said, I'll charge 3% freight, and I'll go to the airport twice a week, Tuesday and Friday, and I'll pick the stuff up, and I'll break it down, and I'll make sure everybody's got their individual order, and I'll bring it back, and I would meet people at one of two supermarkets, okay, in the area, right? And they could pick up their product, and I made an extra 3% for doing that. And they were happy to pay it because they didn't have to spend their valuable time to go down to pick up product, right? And one of my early distributors owned 6 Dairy Queens. Well, he wasn't going to truck down to the airport to pick up product. He was, especially in the spring, he was busy selling ice cream cones and making money. So what I found was I could take something that was a negative and make it a positive if I didn't sell myself 100% on the negativity of the situation. Okay. And, some people might say, try to find a bright spot, whatever reference point you want to use. But that's what I did, was I basically said, hey, let me take what I've been given here. Let me take a lemon and make it lemonade. And so, and it was a good experience for me because I've been doing that now for almost 40 years, just kind of going, okay, let's look at the situation and let's see what we can do. And let's see how we can affect it positively. And as I said, one of my frustrations is I can't always affect it positively.
Right.
But I can try.
Absolutely. Well, did you say HerbaLife was the first company you joined?
That was my first company.
Well,
Right?
I grew up on that. That's why I'm so tall and strong.
Okay, yeah,
That and chiropractors. I mean, that's why I'm solid.
there you go.
But the two things you talked about, mentorship for anybody in network marketing or direct sales, and I'm on like 10 auto ships. I mean, I just love the products and stuff like that. And that's a huge buyer of our motivational books. But one of the things is, if you get into that business, you can't be lonely because there's always coaches and consultants and all these different things. And I would go when I was a little girl with my dad to these huge Amway meetings and stuff like that. And there would be thousands of people, and they just all, you took care of somebody and somebody took care of you and everybody. And it was like a big cheerleading thing. And it was so cool because I thought these people, and then, to get out in the world and go, well, I'm going to go the traditional route. And there wasn't that enthusiasm and that I got your back. Kind of like we had in the military, that camaraderie. But I love the fact that you talked about, I tell people, if you're lonely, you can't be sucking your thumb if you're taking your hands and going to work. And so I think sometimes when we just sit there and fret and wring our hands, that's when this kind of overwhelming loneliness of leadership gets on us. And it's like, just get up and get to work. Because you are only one person and you can only be responsible for your actions. So there are going to be times when you're the only one doing it.
Yep.
But loneliness fades off when you actually are doing things and seeing results. I feel a whole lot less lonely. I am kind of a loner. I was single for 23 years. I mean, I kind of am but I'm never alone feeling lonely because I still got so much activity and connections and books and meetings and stuff like that. So I love how you have that different take on loneliness, that, it's lonely when you're dealing with something and you're like, well, I don't know what to do now because I can't find a solution, but you work through it.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and I think, the only other point I'll make on being lonely, and I'm lonely a lot. Okay. Still, even in my business at times, and I'll pick up the phone and I'll call somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's a prospect or whether it's an existing distributor, or even if it's my upline, somebody to have a conversation with. Okay.
Right.
And that normally solves it. Okay.
Right.
Because they're dealing, and people are dealing with a lot right now. I mean, this is, for our generation, this is unparalleled. We did not live through World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Our parents did, right?
Right.
Our grandparents did, but we didn't,
Right.
right? So at the end of the day, we lived through 9/11, which was harrowing to say the least. But this is unique, and people I find are very, very lonely right now for a lot of different reasons, and one of which is that they're not engaged necessarily in reading the way that they should be.
Mm-hmm.
If your only input, and this is one of the problems I'm having with my own kids, if your only input is either CNN, Fox, MSNBC, one of these other new news channels, or your cell phone, and every time you pick it up, it's more bad news,
Right.
right?
Right.
What are you feeding your brain with?
Right.
Okay, you're feeding your brain with all of this. So, and I found myself, if I check the news before I go to bed, and sometimes I'm guilty of this, I just have to see what's going on, especially the last couple of weeks, right? With what's going on. And I don't want to time date this because I imagine you're going to use it for a while. But the last couple of weeks, there's been other things going on in our country, right? Beyond the COVID, that's very, very serious, right? And need to be dealt with one way or another, needs to be figured out. We need to figure it out as Americans together, without outside influence, by the way. Okay, we need to figure this out as a country. Okay, and I hope and pray that we do. But it's almost like, well, let me check what's happening in Atlanta, or let me check what's happening in Minneapolis. Okay, let me put the news on for 5 minutes. Well, 5 minutes becomes 30, and then all of a sudden I'm going to bed, and it's like it's all playing on me. Right. Whereas if I finish my day going, okay, I'm either reading something positive in prayer, in scripture, or frankly, sometimes watching something really silly. Okay, I'll watch like the King of Queens because I think that couple that was in it were really funny. Okay, so I'll just watch it because it's stupid, right?
Right.
But it's stupid enough and it's funny enough that I'll have a couple of laughs and it's like, okay, that's a good way to end the day.
Right.
Okay, and that's something that we have to train our minds with. When I go back to my experience in college, I had a number of priests as well as lay teachers at university. And one of the priests, I forget the fellow's name. I don't even remember what the class was, frankly. But he came in one morning. I do remember it was our early morning class. Okay. It was like an 8 o'clock in the morning class. And he came in and he apologized to the class. He said, I'm really, really sorry. I've been eating breakfast with a number of people that are extremely negative every morning. They complain about whatever, the university, the kids, whatever. They started the day negative, and it would wear on him. And then he'd come to that first class, and who'd he take it out on? A bunch of 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, right? And one day, I guess, he's an intelligent man. He figured out, wait a minute, I've got to change that water in the fish tank, right? Because it's all negative, it's all polluted. And he stopped eating breakfast with them, and all of a sudden he came in and he was a pleasure to deal with. And so, good life lesson again at an early age is, look, if you're around negative people all the time, or negative news all the time, or negative information all the time, this thing's a computer. What's it going to do? It's just going to get all negative, negative, negative. So, like I said, I'm guilty of it to some degree too, because there is so much going on right now in the world. But at the end of the day, we have to control our minds and emotions and thoughts. And if we don't do that, I don't know what it leads to. What I do know is that we have to do that right now at this point. This is a critical, if there's ever been a time for leadership, whether it's people from my industry or people from other industries to lead, it's now.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, John, for that. Okay. The next topic he talks about is weariness. And he talks about that anytime you're building anything worthwhile, you're going to have some people that are not doing their fair share and other people that are. And I know in my business, whether you went all in or not, you still got paid, whether you know what I'm saying? But your industry is completely different. You're in sales. My dad grew up in insurance and stuff, and it was straight commission. So if you didn't do what you were supposed to do, you didn't get to feed your family. So how do you deal with the weariness of dealing with people? How do you stay motivated when you know what they need to do, but it's just exhausting at times? How do you deal with that?
Well, I always think about some of the people that I've known or known of and how they deal with it. Okay. Mark Hughes, who was the founder of HerbaLife and unfortunately passed away at a young age, 40, I think he was 44 when he passed.
Wow.
But Mark used to say when he got tired of talking to people, he talked to more people.
Okay.
And that kind of worked for me. Okay, where, hey, I believe me, I get no's all the time still in my business. I still have people that just, I'm not doing that, those pyramid schemes and all that other nonsense. And then you got to fight with them to tell them what they don't know. And if I have to sell them on the industry, how do I ever get to finally sell them on my particular company and brand? I mean, it's such a fight, right?
Right.
But I think what Mark taught, and he was absolutely right, was talk to more people. Okay. That's one thing. And then I think of it from another standpoint, from an athletic standpoint, one of my heroes is the great Dan Gable, who 1972 won the Munich Olympics, unbeaten, unscored upon in international freestyle wrestling. And the only thing I'll give, most people aren't familiar with wrestling. Some of your folks in Pennsylvania, of course, are there, but most people aren't. Gable won that Olympics without giving up a singular point in 6 matches. He did that after having knee surgery a couple of months before the Olympics, by the way. Like, it's unheard of. But to give a parallel, let's give a baseball parallel. There's been one guy in history who was with the Reds, Johnny Vandermeer, who pitched 2 no-hitters back-to-back back in the 1930s. Never been done since. This would have been like pitching 6 no-hitters back-to-back. It's not done. The level of competition is too good. It's too easy to give up a point. The man did not give up a single point. Anyway, the greatest of the great, okay, in my opinion. But how Dan Gable thought as a competitor was something that I borrow, and I'll never be Dan Gable. I'm not worthy. I'm not even in his league, athletically or intellectually. The man was a genius in so many ways. But Gable, I remember reading his book as a kid after he won in 72. And Gable talked about the fact that he would step up his training when he would see in his head that his opponent, whether it was a Russian, a Bulgarian, another American for that matter, when he would see that guy get off the mat, take his shoes off, and go get in the shower, is when he would start pushing the bike harder in his after training. Okay? This is a man who trained 7 hours a day to prepare for the 72 Olympics. Wow. Okay, 7 hours. I don't know what you do 7 hours a day to train in any sport. Okay,
wow.
I can figure out about 3 hours. About 7 hours, I can't even think of some of the things this guy put himself through. But you want to be the best. It's why we talked about him 50 years later. It's why kids who weren't even born talk about him. It's why their grandfathers tell their kids about their sons about him. Guys who never wrestled know who Dan Gable is.
Uh-huh.
He's got a great TED talk if anybody wants to go and listen to it. You want to think about a winner. And then, of course, he was able to do something unique that Cale Sanderson's been able to do there at Penn State as well, and others in certain sports, is go from being the best at what he did as an athlete to also being the best with what he did as a coach, leading Iowa to, I think it was 16 or 17 national championships and like 20 Big Ten championships. The guy's unparalleled. His influence is huge. But go back to that point. When Gable saw all the other guys quit, all his competitors quit, they were done for the day. They were going home to their wives or girlfriends or back to their dorm or whatever to relax, is when he said, okay, now I got to train harder. Okay. And that's always kind of been my work ethic is, okay, when I think everybody else is done, okay, now it's time to work.
Right.
Okay. And for example, let me give you an example from my own career. When 2010, I was the first winner of what they call we now call it the Dr. Bunos Award. It's like the Distributor of the Year award for our individual company. Okay, it's named after the doctor, one of the two doctors that created our core product. And I remember getting off the stage. My wife and kids were with me, and lots of handshakes and pictures and all of that. And I grabbed one of my top distributors who had also won another category that night. I grabbed him. I said, James, come on, let's take a walk. What do we do right then? We started planning the next 12 months. Okay.
Yep.
Influence again.
Yep.
Okay. I enjoyed the night. I had a nice time. Okay.
Right.
But I'm not a drinker or party animal, so I wasn't going to go to the bar afterwards. What am I going to? I'm going to plan the next 12 months. What are we going to do? And here's one of my lead guys, 5 feet from me, and I grabbed him by the elbow and I said, let's go work.
Love it.
And we did.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's that work ethic again that you hear, Gable's one example. There's certainly others in all different walks of life, but that was that mentality of what's next. Okay. And Wayne Dyer used to talk about this a lot in reference to the space program. Okay. When he worked with some of the astronauts. Okay. And these guys come back to Earth, they've been in the moon. And their wife says the next week or whatever it is, the next month, whatever, after they're through, their captivity, when they used to come back. Remember, they'd come back from the moon and they
keep them isolated. Yeah.
Can you imagine? Keep people isolated? Oh my God. Wow. There's something we haven't thought of.
We went to the moon. Yeah.
Right. They went to the moon, right? Anyway, so they come back from the moon, and these guys, they go to, their wife would say, go take the garbage out. And they'd be standing out there looking at the moon and saying, I was there last week. Now I'm taking the garbage out.
Yeah.
How do you step from there to there, right? And unfortunately, some of these guys developed other issues and other problems in their lives that he helped them work through. Okay.
Right.
And it's that same thing. If you don't know what's next, you get in trouble. Why do so many ex-athletes? Why do we hear so many of these ex-athletes get themselves in trouble? Right? Guy's been in the Super Bowl. Guy's been in the World Series. Guy's been in whatever, right? Guy's won an Olympic medal. Guy was a great college athlete in some cases. Don't make the pros. The guy gets hurt. He tears up a knee or something. All of a sudden you go, I remember that guy. Next thing you hear, he's off in jail.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or worse than that.
Yeah.
He's on some drug and takes their own lives, which is tragic.
Right.
Because they don't go, okay, they don't make that segue to the next thing. And sometimes in a business, you have to go, okay, we did this much volume. Now we need to do this much volume.
Right.
We had this many new recruits. Now we're going to have this many new recruits. We had this many retail customers. We have to have this many retail customers. If you don't have that next thing in mind, I don't care what level leader you are, you'll get in trouble.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And if you look at it historically, okay, if you look at it from top CEOs, top presidents, top leadership in countries many times, and you look at the background of the people, you'll find they're really competitive. They didn't just land there. They got there, right. And it was the next step.
Right.
Okay. Jim Jordan from Ohio, for example. Okay. Jimmy Jordan was a great wrestler. Okay. Well, he's a great wrestler. Now he's a politician. He could be president of our country at some point down the road. I don't know. I don't know what his plans are, or, how popular he is or isn't. Okay. But Jim's an example from the wrestling world. Okay. There's examples certainly from other activities. Okay. And the same thing from the arts. Right. But you gotta make that next thing's gotta be there. Okay. Right. One of the things I'm trying to work with one of my own children right now. who was a very good figure skater, unfortunately got hurt, tried to come back and be a hockey player. That didn't work out. Now having some issues. Now all the COVID thing, all the other stuff happened in the world, very aware of it, 15 years old, okay, trying to get her to, what's next?
Mm-hmm.
What's next? What's that positive we can, okay, with all of this garbage going on, and everything that's happening to you individually and everything that's happening in the world collectively, how do we help you get to that next
Uh-huh.
thing,
Right.
right? And you've got to get to that next thing as a human being.
Right.
Okay? Whether it's in your business, in your sport, in your art, in your home, you got to get to that next thing or you're going to implode.
Right. Well, and I think, you hit the nail on the head. Weariness, kind of has this bad connotation, but there's a weariness where if you don't feel like you have somewhere to go, you become depleted. And that's a different kind of, it's like a sad, my dad would say there's miserable, and happy miserable. Life is miserable. I choose to be happy miserable. It's the same thing. Weariness, there's tiredness where you just feel like you're drifting. And that's incredibly draining. But the weariness of a leader is often, hey, it's going to be tiring, but I'm going to lay my head down at night and know I did everything I could. And tomorrow I'm going to get some sleep. I'm going to take care of myself so I can get up and be off to the races again tomorrow. And when I get most weary is when I don't have enough going on, and you'd think it would be the different because people are like, oh, you need to slow down. You're going to burn out. And I'm well aware we're not God. We're not machines. We need to take care of ourselves. But I always find there's more in a day I could have done than less I should have done,
Right.
And so what do you call them? The DMOs, the daily mode of operation kind of thing.
Operation. Yep.
Yeah. So your daily mode of operation is, and not all activity is created equal. You have to really make sure that and that's what I want to talk about the next point, abandonment. So what you're talking about is activity, abandoning what you want and like to think about for what you need and ought to think about. So maybe you wanted to stay and celebrate, but abandonment, my dad talks about that in The Price of Leadership. It's just being very targeted. And hey, I know all these other people are offering me sweeter deals, or maybe I'm thinking I should jump ship and do something else. But talk to me about how you stayed honed in, because like I said, you have navigated this industry like nobody else. And you've been in and out of great successful companies and always left a trail of success. How did you stay, but you've been fluid, you've had a lot of changes. How did you know when it was time to close here and go to something else? How do you stay so finely tuned on all that stuff?
Well, to be honest with you, there's been times where I decided to abandon certain things because of ethical issues.
Okay. Been
Earlier
there?
on in my career.
Yes. Yep.
I chose to stay with my current situation for now 24 years because I knew we had product integrity.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, total product integrity, and not always the business integrity we needed, by the way.
Right. Right.
Okay, corporately, but field the field was always committed because the brand, the product came from the scientific community.
Mm-hmm.
So I chose to stay, and will the rest of my career. And I I still get the odd phone call. I got one 2 weeks ago out of the blue. Somebody wanted me to do something, and hey, it could have been fun, could have been lucrative, but not for me because it would have been a distraction from what I'm doing, which is frankly important, I believe, to mankind, what we're
Mm-hmm.
doing with our product. And see, that's the thing too. People get in direct sales for a lot of reasons, but you have to make stuff a life project. Okay, this was a life project for me, network marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I wanted to be in network marketing, but I didn't want to be in it with just something that was run of the mill.
Mm-hmm.
Something I could just, I worked for a guy down here in Dallas a number of years ago. And this is the bad part about getting old, Tracy. Everybody I ever worked with just about dead. But anyway, this fella used to say a lot of companies were started, and he was absolutely right. A lot of companies were started with the idea and the intention that a couple of entrepreneurs got together, said, let's start a company.
Mm-hmm.
Here's going to be the marketing plan. And now what are we going to sell?
Yes.
Well, and once again, if you're a good marketer, you could probably put a spin on anything for a little while,
Mm-hmm.
but eventually you're going to be found out. The
Mm-hmm.
great companies in my industry, okay, the handful of great companies, and there's only a handful after 60 years, are great because generally they have a great product or products. Okay. They have a product that people will buy whether or not they're a distributor making income or not.
Right.
If you only have a brand that people will buy because they're getting a check, then you don't have a business.
Right.
I want to be in a company and with a brand that I felt people would buy whether they ever derived a dime of income from.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a number of years to find out. I finally found it, and it's evolved very, very nicely, and it's continuing to. We're not the only company like that. There's some other very great companies in my industry. But
Mm-hmm.
whether it's the direct selling industry, network marketing industry, multi-level, it's all the same industry basically, or it's, Walmart, or it's General Electric, or it's Microsoft, or it's Apple, or it's whatever. There's a reason great companies are great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I would suggest everybody always checks out Dr. Jim Collins and some of his work, for example. Okay, because Dr. Collins, not only does he study this stuff, but he writes about it so well
Mm-hmm.
that you understand the difference in great companies versus good companies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, for example, as we speak, a good company, and I won't name the brand just in case it gets reversed and I read it wrong, but I just read this before we got on this call. A very good national chain, okay, of fitness facilities just filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy
Uh-huh.
a couple hours ago. To me, a good company, but not a great company. You know why they weren't great?
Why?
Because there are a couple of competitors that I'm familiar with. When I would walk in their gyms, I could eat off the floor.
Mm-hmm.
If there was a piece of paper on the floor, if there was somebody who chewed gum and stuck it on the carpet or the back of a treadmill, the great gyms, somebody, whether it was a manager or even a low-level employee, would see it and remove it because they cared about their job and they cared about their brand.
Mm-hmm.
The brand that just filed bankruptcy, I've been in some of their gyms that, frankly, you would not want to use the men's room or women's room.
Huh.
Okay? So why is that? Now, all of a sudden, in a critical time where we're in this economy of need versus want, right? Up until about March 1st, we were in a want economy. People wanted fancy cars, they wanted fancy homes, they wanted fancy items, right? Now we're in an economy of need where people are only going to buy what they need.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, somebody says, wait a minute, for the same money, roughly, I can go to this gym that I can eat off the floor. I feel like I'm at a country club. We're going to go to this gym, which is dirty.
Mm-hmm.
Which are you going to go to? I know which one I'm going to.
Right.
Okay. So that's the type of thing, that type of thinking that develops championship organizations is when you think, hey, wait a minute. Yeah, it might not be my job to take that icky gum off the floor,
Mm-hmm.
but I know a member's not going to like it. So I'm going to go get the spatula and I'm going to clean it up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's the type of thinking that the great companies develop, that from the top down, from the owner, the developer, the CEO. There is not that thing. And this is what I found in companies that really survive long term in my industry. There's no specific job for anybody. The job of everybody is brand management, brand development.
Huh.
Okay. Whether you're the person taking out the trash or the CEO or the top distributor or anything in between, when these companies make it, they all have that philosophy that there is no, protecting the brand, nurturing the brand, growing the brand is something that's all of our responsibilities instead of saying, well, that's not my job. Nothing drives me crazier than somebody telling me it's not their job.
Right. Right.
If you work in my company, if you work in a great company, it's all your job.
Right. Right.
In my career, I've painted warehouses.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, on a Saturday morning. I've shipped product internationally for distributors that needed it, where the company ran out of in different places, and gone to the airport to ship product. Okay, loaded up my own truck to do it. I did that as an executive in the industry. I've done that as a distributor in the industry. Okay. I painted a warehouse with the owner of a company in Toronto many, many years ago. Why? Because we had an issue with the government and they said, you have till Monday morning to have a certain type of paint because our product was a food related product. You have until Monday morning to get this right. We're coming back. It was Friday afternoon.
Right.
You weren't going to get a painter in Toronto on Friday afternoon. Guess who painted the warehouse? Me and him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We painted it. Why?
Right.
It was in his best interest and my best interest. We didn't say, well, it's not our job.
Right.
Okay.
Wow.
So, and that philosophy is something that people have to have in their distributorships, or if they're not in my industry, whatever your business is, it's all your job. Oh, I'm not a great marketer. I'm just a great whatever. No, you're all in marketing. You're
Mm,
all in
yeah,
sales. You're
that's
all
good.
in brand development.
Yeah,
There, there is no, there is no, it's the other guy's job. It might be, and he might be
right,
making more money than you. But you
right.
know what? You want it to be around. You have to have that philosophy, especially now,
Well,
because I read the other day there's 25,000 retail stores that'll go out of business between now and Christmas.
right, right.
Thousand. And I see it here, and I live in a fairly affluent part of Dallas.
Hmm.
I'm seeing it just going into different malls where, whoa, that guy's gone. Oh,
Hmm.
that guy didn't reopen.
Hmm.
Oh, that guy, he's got a sign up, he's reopening, but there's no activity.
Right, right.
So what's it like out in the hinterland? I don't know.
Right. Well, you talk about your abandonment then is almost like a message to Garcia. Just
Mhm.
do it. You have to be abandoned to do whatever it takes to keep the organization thriving and healthy, and not sit there and wait for somebody to tell you what to do, or worse yet. So that's a really it's the flip side, because abandonment is usually people equate with, okay, I'm walking away from something, but your version of abandonment is going all in. I'm abandoning everything that I have, all the resources, my cognitive abilities, my initiative, to protecting this brand. And that's such a great insight, John, because I mean, a lot of people on here are entrepreneurs like us. And, it's like, well, people are like, well, I don't want to do cold calls, or I don't want to do outside sales, or I don't want to do B2B. And I'm like, well, dear Lord, when you're like us, you better all figure out how to do it, because I'm not big enough or bureaucratic enough or have enough excess, profit that I can just hire certain people to do certain things. You better figure it out, and we'll figure it out, because, none of us is as smart as all of us together, and we will figure it out,
That's right. Well,
so I love
one other example of that, somewhere along the line, I've read a lot of autobiographies of entrepreneurs.
that. Hmm.
And I remember Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's,
Right.
talked about, they used to give out and they may still do this, I don't know, but uh, he used to give out, at least when he was around, when he was alive, they
Hmm.
used to give out a scholarship. I want to say it was $25,000. I apologize to McDonald's if that's not the number, but I think it was 25 grand that they gave to anybody who came with a good idea that the business eventually used.
Hmm.
If you remember back when we were kids, McDonald's didn't do breakfast.
Right.
Some young
Right.
kids out there, I think it was a high school kids, 15, 16-year-old kids out there throwing out these hamburger rolls at night. And it dawns on him, he goes, boy, if you stuck an egg on this, probably tastes pretty good. Okay.
It does.
I guess he went home and, mom and dad said, hey, why don't you write that up and send it to Mr. Kroc? And I don't know, one way, shape, or form, it helped McDonald's to go, yeah, like, why are we throwing out all this food? That's kind of
Right.
crazy, right? Like, let's
Right.
have breakfast. And I guess, and it's probably more from there. I guess they put it on an English muffin now or something. But my point is, that young man had a good idea. It didn't matter. He was a young kid throwing out the trash in some, McDonald's and wherever he was. Ray Kroc thought it was a good enough idea. He instituted it. It's made that company billions of dollars, I'm sure, over the years. So
Oh,
was it
yeah.
worth it for the company to give the kid, 25 grand for college?
Right.
Absolutely. And so
Right.
sometimes we're always looking for all these great ideas from all these really smart people, and they don't have them.
Right.
Sometimes it's going to come from somebody who goes, well, have you thought about this? And that's
Hmm.
why you got to listen to everybody. Doesn't mean you have to agree with everybody, but you should listen at least to say, what do they have to say? I often said this, Tracy, if I was starting a company today, any kind of company,
Hmm.
my board of directors would not look like you and I.
Hmm.
There'd be somebody look like you and somebody look like me,
Hmm.
but everybody wouldn't look like us.
Right.
I make sure I had ethnicity and at different ages.
Right.
Why? Because my 15 and 16-year-olds see things much differently than you and I do.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And somebody in between, somebody maybe in their mid 30s, sees things a little bit different.
Hmm.
And somebody growing up in the inner city sees things a little bit different than somebody growing up in the middle of Nebraska.
Hmm.
But it doesn't mean that their points are any more or less valuable
Hmm.
from a marketing standpoint of what people are going to react to. I've
Right.
learned so much in the last 3 years from some of my Spanish speaking colleagues. Stuff that I thought I knew that I go, wow, I never thought of that. Wow.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I listen. My Spanish is very limited, so I listen, and for the translation when I go to different meetings, and I learned so much from some of my Spanish-speaking colleagues. Some of which, by the way, are half my age.
Hmm.
Some of them are old dogs, but a lot of them are, 25, 30 years old. They grew up with the iPhone. They grew up with the internet. They grew up marketing with stuff that I wasn't really good at using. Where I'm like, well, why wouldn't I listen? Because they're half my age.
Right.
If a smart person's going to listen to everybody, doesn't mean I can do all that they wanted that they're doing. Okay,
Right.
I mean, I don't even want to do what they're doing, but it doesn't mean that I should poo-poo it and not listen to it,
Mm-hmm.
because it may not even apply to me. But I may have somebody, that I think, wow, that really applies to this or that person. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. Yeah. So then you're also talking about, as leaders, abandoning our own sense that once we get to a certain level that we know it all.
Yeah.
And our own set. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like getting my PhD recently, I'm like, man, there was a lot about leadership that I did not know. And it's like, ooh, but it's scary at first because you're like, oh dear Lord, how wrong I've been. But then you're like, okay, so I'm learning, give yourself grace and abandon this thing that you're always going to make the right decisions all the time.
Well, I'll give you one perfect example of what you just said.
Mhm.
I met Norman Schwarzkopf a number of years ago.
Uh-huh.
He was here in Dallas, and amongst other things, most people don't know this, but his dad started the New Jersey State Troopers way back.
Oh, I did not know that.
Oh yeah,
Huh.
yeah. He quite a family. But amongst other things, I'll never forget him talking about the fact that he and General Peale, and you know this probably better than I do, being in the military as long as you were. Those guys started to prepare at war colleges way back. This phone never rings unless I'm doing it. That they had started to prepare at the war colleges, okay, early on in their careers, to have what resulted in the first Gulf War.
Mm-hmm.
To fight a war in basically in the sand, in the desert, that they started that far back. And you think about it, it's one. So you and I would think about it as business. Well, it's one subject those guys were really good at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were really good at it. It took them a whole 9 days, right, to do what they needed to do.
Right.
So you think about it at a big macro level like that, and you think it's one subject, but they knew every single thing to do, and they were so in sync, and they did the job that
Right.
they did in such an efficient manner. They made it look easy. They made something
Right.
very, very difficult look extreme. Rest of we looked at it like, are these guys even fighting back? Well, no, they had it all figured out. They knew where they were going to be, right? So that execution. And we look at that in sports sometimes. We can look at it in other pursuits in life where somebody makes something look easy to us.
Right.
And but anyway, that's a perfect example of one.
It is.
Spend a lifetime on one subject. Leadership could be that one subject you could spend 50 years on and go, oh, I know this much.
Yeah, and I know this one, and I know that war because I was over there for it. And we went out, we prepped, and boom, it kicked off, and it was over before we knew it. And I was like, and I got to meet Storm and Norman. I was at Shaw Air Force Base, and he came at the end. I was starstruck. I was like I could have met the biggest movie star, and I would have been like, whatever. And I was like, oh my gosh, I couldn't believe it. It was incredible. Yeah, that knowing that, and I think it was Earl Nightingale said that if you just spend an hour a day, just work days, we'll give you weekends off, which is roughly 1,300 hours a year. In 5 years, you will become one of the top experts in one area. So you can become that finely tuned. And they talk about that in the doctoral research program. Don't be the, a mile wide and an inch deep. Really go deep, and that good to great too. Companies know what their zone of core competence is, and they're really, really good at it. And if something gets fragmented or pulled off, that's okay, because in the publishing industry, there's all kind of intersections and pieces pulled off. That's okay. But you stay true to your core thing, which it sounds like you found your company that does that, and that's what everybody coalesces behind, because that's your identity kind of thing. So that's
I've even had people say to me, how have you spent all these years doing one thing?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you one other good example of that. Years and years ago, I dated an actress in New York, and she had been in Phantom and some of the other big shows, been very, very successful in her own career. So we're out to dinner one night with some of her colleagues, and there was one lady who had been in the show since the very first night, and we were out. It was the 10-year anniversary party for New York. So figure how many shows are that when you figure there's 8 shows a week, even if they take 1 or 2 off, that's 6 shows. That's, I don't know, 300 shows a year times 3,000 shows, let's say, that this woman had been in. So how in the world do you do the same? Think about it. There's no way I'd live in live theater. Like you better be where you're supposed to be, because that next that next person's doing their line or singing their next line or moving a piece of equipment, like it's an organism. It's a moving thing, right?
Hmm.
And she made a great point. She said, here's what I remember. People sitting in the audience, it's their first show.
Right.
Ah, okay. So for them, what I'm doing, they've never seen before.
Right.
So I have to do it well every time. And that's what I've told myself over the years. I mean, I can tell my business story in my sleep. But if you're hearing it for the first time, right, about what happened and the details, it has an impact on you. I'm not telling it for me, I'm telling it for you. Just like that actor or actress is singing or saying that line for you. You spent your hard-earned money to be there. That's the way I look at it. Is what my audience is. Hey, these people spent their time and money to get here.
Yeah.
They need to have some value. They need to be able to take something home with them.
Right. Abandoning yourself to giving it your all. Every presentation, every meeting, every performance. I love that.
My wife said, just one other note. My wife said to me one time, I was doing something in Toronto, and she's never with me. I talk about abandonment. I built this business by myself. I mean, I've never had a partner in it as far as a wife. But she was raising a kid. She was doing something more important.
Yeah.
But I remember I finished about a 2-hour meeting, and she said, "You're exhausted." He says, I've seen you do powerlifting meets. You're not this tired. I said, yeah. I said, no, it wasn't because I was getting, it was only a couple of years ago. And I said, you got to understand something. I just invested everything I got.
Yeah.
I got nothing left. I got nothing to talk about. I got nothing I want to do. I got nothing I want to eat. I want to go and take a shower and go to bed. And that's what it's supposed to be. You're investing in your audience.
Right. You ran that race.
Why are they there? More importantly, why are you there?
Right. I love it. I love it. Okay. Last one is vision. And my father said that vision isn't something that, like you said, when you were younger, you thought it was something that the super smart or the super gifted or the visionaries, a visionary. But my dad always said that vision was just seeing what needed to be done and then doing it. And it sounds like you have that very pragmatic look about, I see an opportunity and I'm the one that's going to pick up the tools and go execute it. So how do you set your vision? How do you get these quote epiphanies, or how do you set the direction for where you're going to go next, or your team?
Well, most of the time, and I'll give you an example you're familiar with, just in my company. Okay, pandemic starts. I'm supposed to be. I'm in Monterrey, Mexico, when the what starts hitting the fan. And I'm communicating back to the U.S. and Canada and finding out, hey, airports are closing, businesses, like things are getting bad. So I come back here to the U.S. This is on March 8th. And I get back here to Dallas. I'm not supposed to really be in Dallas. I'm going to be in Dallas one day. I'm turning around going to Baltimore to do a meeting. And if in Baltimore, I'm supposed to be going to Toronto because the next weekend I have a big event in Montreal. And I happen to live in Canada part of the time anyway, and my wife and kids were up there. And so I'm supposed to be, logistically, bouncing all over the place. And all of a sudden, it's like, I talked to my wife and she's like, the Canadian border's closed. You can't get in the country unless you're going to be quarantined 14 days. I'm like, me in captivity for 14 days? No, that's not going to work. And we have a very small house there on top of it. So, that's not going to work. And I was supposed to go see one of my favorite musicians, Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes. I was going to Baltimore to do a meeting. And then one of my friends from high school is Johnny's manager. I was going to his concert the next night, backstage, meet Johnny and the guys in the band, which I did like 40 years ago. And now they're all old and I'm old, but they're still doing their thing like I'm doing my thing. And, so, I'm a Jersey Shore guy, you know what I mean? Like that whole sound I love and the big horn section. Anyway, so all of that's, forget it. Everything's canceled. Concerts canceled, meetings canceled, flights are canceled, life is canceled generally. And I'm like, I have an audience in Montreal of probably 300 people that are showing up next Saturday. Well, they're not going to show up. So what do I need to do? So I created this whole Zoom-tacular concept, which was I'm going to bring the meeting to them via Zoom. Now, I know other people are doing similar things in my business and other businesses. So it's not like I created any of that, but I created the content where it would be as if you were sitting there, in Montreal at that meeting, or in Toronto, or in Chicago, or in Monterrey, Mexico, just like you were sitting there, where you would get something about our product from our medical people. something about our business from our key distributors, something about how to build a business, because at the end of the day, that's why distributors listen to these things,
Right.
and something obviously from the corporation to know that, hey, the corporation is there, it's functional. During crisis, people need to hear this functionality.
Mm-hmm.
And they did. And our CEO did a great job and has done a great job on all the calls to deliver that message. But more than that, they need to hear, hey, there's going to be a tomorrow.
Right.
Okay. We're going to come out of this thing. I don't know when this thing's over. Nobody does. Tony Fauci doesn't know. I mean, he's
Right.
guessing with the rest of us. He knows more than I do, but who really knows, right? We look at all of these tables and John Hopkins, and now we're seeing another surge in it. I don't know when this thing ends. But here's what I do know. World War II ended. 9/11 ended.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
World War I ended. Korea ended, right? Wars end. Situations end. This will end.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, hopefully it's going to end sooner than later. We've already lost some really good people to it, and a lot of people sick, and not to even talk about the economics of it.
Mm-hmm.
But people need to hear that. Where leadership makes a mistake is when leadership panics.
Mm-hmm.
Leadership cannot panic. Okay. I go back to two things in my own life. One was, and neither were good times. One was the death of my daughter. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I lost a daughter now, the 18 years. And when I lost her, my family was, how are you so calm? Number one, I believe that she's in a better place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But that doesn't, at the moment, that, especially with a child, that doesn't really make you feel all that good, to be honest with you. But I knew that there would be another day. I knew the sun was going to rise again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. No matter how bad I felt at that time, I knew. And I knew for my wife and for my then 7-year-old daughter that they needed to see me not fall apart. Now, I fell apart privately, let me tell you. I fell apart at the gym, because that's where I go. I don't drink, so I go to the gym. I'm gonna work it off in the gym, and I'm laying there wiping my face, crying the whole time I'm there on the treadmill. Okay, but you've got to find a place to work it out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was once, and then I think that was one big one, and then I think the other time was once again where you had to have vision. 17, I think I've shared this story with you. Okay. I was diagnosed with what was called spondylolisthesis,
Mm-hmm.
which is where your vertebrae are basically like this, where they're wrapped around each other around your spinal cord.
Mm-hmm.
So I lost the mobility in my right side. I was basically crippled my junior year, part of my senior year of high school. So I went from this jock, all out, strong kid that lived in the weight room, that played football, that wrestled, to basically doing nothing. And when I had the operation, I'll never forget what happened was I had a vision where they came in and they gave me the drugs to basically start knocking me out. And I had this vision, okay, that God spoke to me and basically told me, hey, you're going to get past this. It's going to be all right. And then I remember the doctor, Dr. Burton, came in, okay, who I'm sure by now is dead. He was probably in his 60s then. He came in, I'll never forget, this man could hold his hand out and it wouldn't move. And I had such confidence in him that I knew he could fix me. But along that line, sometimes I think back to Paul being in prison and saving the guard, right? I had to have that experience, because if I had not had that experience, I wouldn't have read two things. Okay. Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, okay, was the first book I ever really read. Was Dr. Peale's book about positive thinking. Yeah. And it's still on a shelf behind me here, by the way.
Uh-huh.
And then that was the first book. My father, who was an alcoholic, at that point at that point he was in recovery. Okay, had brought me that book and given it to me in the hospital. Wow. And then, of course, As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. And if I hadn't read those two books at that time, if I hadn't had that downtime, if everything was great, if I was wrestling along and football and everything was great, and I was going to go to a big college and university and scholarship, and I was lifting and running and getting ready, I may not have had those moments.
Right.
And as painful physiologically and emotionally as they were, without those moments, wouldn't have created later moments. Okay.
Yeah.
So sometimes these things happen where they just have to happen.
Yeah.
And we don't understand. Larry Thompson, one of my mentors and good friends, always said, had a great expression. It was, things don't just happen just. Oh, no, what is it? Things don't happen just, they happen justly. I think it was, or something along those. It made sense
Mhm.
when he said it. I'm trying to think exactly what he said. But things don't just happen. Yeah. Oh no, things don't just happen. Things happen just. I
Oh,
don't know whether he
okay.
created that expression or he got it from somebody else, but nonetheless, it made a lot of sense. Things happen just. And that's kind of what happened again was, these things had to happen for me, unfortunately, or it wouldn't have made me what I became, whatever I became, good, bad,
Mhm.
and indifferent. There's both in me. Okay. Not only my career, but in my personal life. If those things hadn't happened, it wouldn't have created the future that I had,
Right.
and maybe it wouldn't have given me the strength,
Mhm.
okay, when other people are hurting, okay, to be able to help them.
Right.
Okay, maybe it would have made me that much cold-hearted because, well, I'm successful. Look at me, instead of going, hey, not everybody's successful.
Right.
And we think of it in business terms. We're always, we're all about money and about success and about rank advancement. Man, if that's all you're about in network marketing, you're a failure. I don't
Right.
care how big your check
Right.
is. If you don't get that this business, and I look, I did not ever have the privilege of meeting Rich DeVos or Jay Van Andel. Your dad did. They were great men.
Mhm.
I never met Mary Kay directly, okay, but I can tell you, I know enough people who worked for her. What a great human being
Mhm.
he
Mhm.
was.
Mhm.
I did know Mark Hughes. He was a great man, okay, and I did some work for the Shackley Corporation a number of years ago. Okay. So I believe Dr. Shackley was a great man.
Mhm.
These were great human beings that evolved this industry. If we look at those four companies, okay, Amway, Shackley, Mary Kay, and HerbaLife, those are four companies started by four people who were visionary,
Mhm.
hardworking. Okay. My God, the stuff they must have went through. I mean, Mary Kay, she starts her company, her husband dies.
Right. Right.
She starts her company with her kid,
Right.
and
Our
here it
son.
is
Yep.
all these years later. It's humongous, right? And all those companies went through different things and different series of events. But my point about all four of them is, okay, they were started by great people who cared more about their people, their distributors, their employees, than they did about the bottom line. They all made money. Families are still extremely wealthy in all those cases, and they should be. Okay, nothing wrong with that, by the way. We're
Right.
never going to apologize for success.
Right.
But my point is, they were all started. And the same thing, you look at Walmart. Sam Walton was a great man.
Mhm.
Walt Disney was a great man. These were
Mhm.
great people.
Mhm.
It just happened to have a business idea that worked.
Mhm.
So
Oh, I love it. And some of our other leaders that we've had on always say when it gets down to vision, your vision has to be tied to people. It can't be tied to a product or profits. That will happen. And like you said, a product you can believe in. But it's like why my dad loved the insurance industry because he saw what people could become as a result of pouring into it. And any sales thing, the more you pour into it, the more you develop and get out of it. And so it was just, he just really was quite, not just that everybody needs a product because you don't know when you're going to meet your maker and you want to take care of the people that are left, but that, as an insurance salesman, what could you do? The sky's the limit. They gave him all the tools, all the mentorship, and he really believed in helping others, just like you. I mean, that's what drove him.
well, it has to drive you because if you think money is enough to drive you, you can't do this stuff for 40
No,
years.
yeah, right,
You know what I mean? Like, look, the money's important.
right.
Okay, but the money's important, and we just I don't know if I should talk about this or not, but I will. You can edit it if you want. But we just did a thing where I said to my wife, I'm 59 now, and
Uh-huh.
she's 50, so we're not young anymore. Okay, we're not that old, but we're we're getting there. So we updated our wills.
Mhm.
Why? Well, we're home. Let's update our wills.
Right.
Okay. We actually went out. We decided we want to be cremated. We went out and we actually pre-bought the thing through the Neptune Society. Okay,
Mhm.
where when we're done, the kids can put us wherever. Like we'll be move the pail with our ashes, right?
Yeah.
Um, a couple of other things we're working on, from a planning standpoint, right? And the reason I bring that up is not to be macabre at all,
Mm-hmm.
okay? But your dad was in a life insurance business. I spent a few years in a life insurance business along the way. We took a little segue from network marketing in the early '80s, and you think about it a little differently. Funeral directors and insurance guys, they have interesting senses of humor, as you well know, because it's like, hey, they deal with death every day. It's a
Yeah.
reality of life, right? It's going to happen to all of us. There is one day you're not going to wake up.
Right.
But having said that, and trying to put it in a good light, okay, be prepared, right? Make sure these things are done so that the kids don't have to wrestle with, oh my God, where's dad's insurance? Did dad have insurance?
Right.
Right? Okay.
Right.
Oh,
I
gee,
know.
do I owe the government money? Do I all these things that we need to take care of individually and collectively if you're married? Now's a good time to take care of them.
Mm-hmm.
Not because once again you're thinking that something's going to happen soon. Let's hope it doesn't happen for 30 or 40 years. But
Mm-hmm.
why not be prepared just in case?
Right. Well,
And we might use this time.
yeah. And you talked about, I mean, I've taken the last 3 months too and got things done I never thought I'd get done. So, the leadership, great leaders and the leadership literature really talks about when the crisis hits, that affords you an opportunity to get so focused. And I mean, almost everybody I interviewed in my research was like, I love it because I can get down to business and everything else superfluous just floats away. And so, yeah, it is a great time to just get down to brass tacks because otherwise we just get so stuffed full of this non-value added stuff. And
Exactly.
so I love that. And that clouds our vision because, we think everything rises to the top. And I love that you brought up that, when this happened, you're like, okay, it is what it is. I'm going to get stressed for like 30 seconds and then go, okay, now what? Now, what do we do? How do we
Yeah.
adopt to this? The planet didn't blow up, the rapture didn't happen. So here we are, we have to keep going. What are we going to do? Let's just get on with it. So
Well,
I love
and
that.
I think in some respects that we as a world, because this is not an American problem, this is a worldwide problem. I think in some respects we're going to come out better for this.
Mm-hmm.
And here's why I think that. Okay, I think family issues that maybe have been ignored are getting addressed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe the TV's not on as much because it's on. If you're home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you never were after you get past the fact that Gunsmoke is on at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay, like that. Okay, you know what? I don't need to watch TV all night. Maybe I'll actually talk to my kids or my spouse.
Right. Or read a
Okay,
book.
I think a lot of people are getting back to their faith.
Yeah.
Whatever their faith is, whether it's the same one you and I share, whether it's others. I think people are spending time saying, "Hey, pandemic. We hit January 1st. This thing doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Here we are. It's not even 4th of July, and look at what's happened
Right.
to our world, right?
Right.
And our country and our economics, and what are we up to? 120 some odd thousand people dead. I mean, it's a lot of people. I've lost 3 myself.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at all of that, and you start to say, what's really important?
Mm-hmm.
And you prioritize. And maybe now, because we're not in such a rush, because we are in a rush, but we're not in a rush. Now, all of a sudden, maybe people are prioritizing things that in the past hadn't been the priorities that they needed to be. And I know in my case, that's the case.
Right. Well, you said it. We're more needs focused, not wants. And, part of the thing too, we went through some stuff, when I was younger, there was Vietnam War and stuff like that, 9/11, whatever, being in war. But, the greatest generation was the greatest generation because of what they went through and how chiseled and resilient and selfless and we're all collective they were and built our nation. And so, we went through so many decades of prosperity. We didn't have any of the, it was just assumed that life is going to always be like this and that, we're entitled to all this prosperity that no one else has had the benefit of having. So, and still in 2020 don't. So it's just interesting that you said that. And I too know we're coming out better. And I think it's been a great clarion call for a lot of leaders to go, okay, we can look at people and really separate the sheep from the goats. Okay, where are we? And do we have this sense of optimism and resiliency that we're gonna push through? And it's something everybody has to be going through with their teams, building their business and themselves, you know?
I've had adults that are pretty tough that have been in tears.
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
It's been
saying
incredibly unsettling. Yeah.
I don't know the future.
Yeah.
And I said, well, you never did.
Yes, I
That's
know.
the reality. We don't. We never really did. We thought we did because we could project all sorts of things about all sorts of different stuff. The reality is you can't project anything. Now that doesn't mean, once again, don't plan.
Right.
Make sure that, make that checklist, right? Life insurance, wills, this, all the stuff that maybe you've been putting off for years, right? It's a great time now to say, hey, got this extra time. Hey, let's pull out that document we did 20 years ago and update it, right?
Hmm.
For
Hmm.
example. That
Yes.
was our case. Ours was 17 years old.
Big
I'm
time.
embarrassed to say my will was 17 years old. Some of the stuff on there I don't even own anymore.
Yeah.
Same wife, same kids, fortunately. But it's like, oh my God, we gotta, things like that maybe you've been putting off. Because look, when this ends, you're gonna get real busy again.
I know.
Those
I
things
know.
get pushed to the side again.
Right.
So, once again, take advantage of time. There's a expression my father used to use, give time time.
Hmm.
And I think it's an AA expression, frankly, but
Huh.
it's give time time. It's like, look, some of these things that you've been putting off, maybe now's the time to do them. I
Mhm.
know I've talked, and I'm sure you have too. I've talked to friends around the country, around the world for that matter, but more mostly here in North America, that I haven't really talked to in years. I mean, really talked to. Okay, like what's really happening?
Mhm.
Like what's really going on in your life? Tell me,
Mhm.
because I've missed the last 5 or 10 years because I've been busy. I've been
Right.
raising my family, building my business. Tell me what's really going on in your life. And I've reconnected with some really great people that, not that I blew off, I was in contact with them or I wouldn't have been talking to them now, but it was more business. It was more superfluous in the past. Now it's been more like, hey, we have time. Let me
Right.
sit on the back porch and let's actually catch up. What have you been up to?
Nice.
How's life? And
I
boy,
love
I
it.
found out a lot of interesting stuff. I've spent more time talking to my two sisters in the last 90 days than I've spent in the last 20 years.
I know. I've really had a great time of coming together with my siblings too. Yeah. Yeah. So take advantage of that. I love it. Well, John, anything else as we're parting with leaders on the price of leadership? And then I want you to tell people how to get in touch with you. Any other parting comments about paying the price of leadership from somebody that is still totally middle-aged and got a lot of leadership to go? But anything else that you haven't already covered about leadership and what it takes to be a leader?
I would say, just a couple of things. I'm just kind of, shooting from the hip. Number one, is it worth it? You got to ask yourself, is it worth it? Okay. Because there is the loneliness that your
Mhm.
dad talked
Mhm.
about, that
Mhm.
you and I are very familiar with.
Mhm.
Okay. There's the weariness, right? There
Yeah.
is the weariness. I mean,
Yeah.
there's times I've come back from trips where I've been in, 8 cities in 12 days and just exhausted and wiped out. And all of a sudden I got to turn around and be a family man
Mhm.
and try to have energy for all kinds of other stuff that
Right.
I've been busy. Okay.
Mhm.
And the abandonment. I mean, I've been abandoned by distributors. I've been abandoned by family. I've been abandoned by lots of different things over the years. Is it worth it?
Mhm.
You got to answer that question. For me, it was,
Mhm.
and not because I've been blessed to make a lot of money. I've done okay financially, done very well. Okay, could have done better, but I did well. For the son of a construction worker, okay, with no education, who died young, and a secretary, I did really well. Okay, but could I have done better? Sure. I made a heck of a lot of mistakes.
Mhm.
So, boy, Tracy, I tell you, if I ever wrote a book about all the mistakes, it'd be like War and Peace. I mean, it'd be about the oath thick. And I'm not done yet. I'll probably make a few more, but so many, and just so many mistakes. But you gotta ride the highs. I think back to Coach
Mhm.
Landry,
I love it.
and I hate the Dallas Cowboys. By the way, I live in Dallas. I'm a New York Giants fan all the way, still. But how could you not admire Tom Landry,
I
right? When he
know.
was
My dad loved him. Yeah.
and you look at Coach Landry, right? And he could be winning the Super Bowl by 2 touchdowns. The man's demeanor did not change. The man could be losing the game 40-0. The man's demeanor did not change. He
That's
never got
right.
too high,
Yeah.
never got too low. Now, he was a very religious man, as we both know, so he had other priorities. But I've met some guys here in town over the years that played for him, knew him, worked for him, different capacities that they had relationships with Coach Landry. And you look at Landry, never got too up, never got too down. Okay. And that's kind of what I try to tell people about leadership. Look, you're going to have your moments where, man, you're going to be on the top of the world. Okay. Behind me, here's a lot of trophies, mostly from my athletic career, some from my business career, hundreds of them. And when I look at the business ones, okay, and the 2 that we talked about earlier in my resume, right, when I was recognized as top distributor of my company, 2 different companies over my career, that I've been recognized as that, publicly at huge events. Those are real up times. Let me tell you. You think you're on the top of the world when you look out there too, and it's all your downline. You know what I mean? It's like everybody there. You don't know who they are, what level, but boy, they're all somewhere in the group. And boy, that's a proud moment. But if that is the only reason why, if that's the only thing you think is going to push you and get you up in the morning and go to work, it's not. And you'll never get, by the way, you'll never get to that level if you think that way. Okay. This is a day at a time, brick at a time, process by process business. And life is that way.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, is the leadership worth it? Yeah. Have I been sworn at? Have I been spit on? Have I been talked about, gossiped about? I've had one guy that told somebody in the industry, I'm totally useless. He's like, I don't even know how the guy makes a living. The guy's useless. Wow. That got back to me along the way. That really hurt. It was like a punch to the heart.
Yeah.
By the way, because of those 2 black belts, none of these people ever say this stuff publicly. By the way, I always get it third hand. It's like that.
Yeah.
But that's a good thing. And I'm being a little funny with that. But no, I've been told I've been crap and garbage by people. Okay, in my business and in my life. Okay, and worse. I'm being nice. It's a Christian show.
Yeah.
Okay, what words than that? But I when I think about it, it's like, look, somebody had to lead. It might as well have been me in my little role in network marketing. Okay, if I've changed a few lives, which I believe I have for the better, okay, then great. Okay, when I leave this planet, okay, my family should be comfortable financially. Okay, there's a great scene in one of the many Rocky movies that Sylvester Stallone made with Burgess Meredith, when Burgess Meredith, I guess he had set him up with some fights that were kind of like powder puffs, where Rocky wins the fights easy, if you think about those movies, which I love. And so Stallone, goes and he confronts him, and he's like, yeah, I don't know, he's yelling at him in his best Philadelphia accent. And Burgess Meredith says, I just wanted you to be prepared for when I'm not here, so you could take care of yourself.
Oh.
And that's the message of leadership.
Yeah.
If I think about the shoulders that helped to create me as a leader in network marketing, people like Mark Hughes, who's dead, Charlie Regas, who's dead, Bobby DePue, who's dead, Rich DeVos, Jay Van Andel, Dr. Shackley, Mary Kay Ash, that are dead. Okay. People like Larry Thompson, who I'm glad to say is still alive. Okay. My original upline in HerbaLife when I started, my good friend Mark Zuckerbrod, for example, and my other good friend Tommy Husted, who lives over in the Philippines now, are both very much alive, by the way. All those people, okay, all the speakers that I heard through the years, for example, okay. When I watched Tom Hopkins, okay, who's not a network marketing guy, a real estate guy. Right. Tom Hopkins, and I met Tom, and I was a kid. I was, 21 years old maybe. I went to one of Tom's seminars, and we're walking down the hallway together, and I was pretty shy at the time, and I told him that, and he looked at me and he said, "Well, you have to learn how to do it. You have to do what you fear most." So he took out one of his business cards. He wrote that on the back. Do what you fear most. He said, "Put this in your wallet." And I did. I carried that. I've lost it since, but I've probably carried that thing in my wallet for 10, 15 years.
Wow.
So once again, I didn't create any of this stuff. I saw other people do it. When I think outside of business, when I think of Dan Gable, what a great leader that man is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When I think of politics, when I think of Ronald Reagan,
Mm-hmm.
okay, what a great leader the man was.
Mm-hmm.
Humble. By the way, most of these people, at least the ones that I've known, are really humble.
Yeah.
You know, I knew Jim
Right.
Rohn a little bit. I knew your dad a little bit. Okay. I've known some of the other great, great long-term self-development gurus, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
They're all really humble people,
Mm-hmm. They are.
surprisingly. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Authoritative,
Right.
they got an opinion, you're going to hear it, and you're going to hear why they have it. They'll be able to defend it. But
Yes.
they're all really humble people,
Yeah.
and you learn so many little things from them. You know what I mean? And so, once again, just built on the shoulders of lots and lots of, and there's so many others I could mention, distributors and corporate and trainers and people I've known that have nothing to do with network marketing or great leaders and other things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. People from a distance,
Mm-hmm.
as well. I mean, your Gandhis and people like that, for example. I mean, that you just go, wow, those people know how to lead. Dr. Martin Luther King, they knew how to lead. You wonder what those guys would be thinking if they were here today. you
Wow.
know,
Yeah.
well, they'd have some interesting things to say, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But once again, so many great leaders. So you can learn leadership,
Uh-huh.
but it doesn't make you a great leader. Just and this would be my I guess my last word on this. You cannot be a great leader just reading about it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you should read about it. And you should study it,
Right.
but you have to do it.
Right.
And that's the mistake that people do make. Because I have people come to me all the time, and I won't name any trainers, but I'm going to this guy's training or that guy's training. I go, terrific. When are you going to get about building your business?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go to this training here and this training here and this guy's training and this guy, and I'm going to walk across fires, and and that's all wonderful. You
Right.
should do it.
Right.
But at the end of the day, when are you going to get about building your business?
Right.
Okay. It's great. That guy, you're paying that guy. Believe me, his business is doing fine. Or
Yeah.
that guy, you know what I mean? And it's always occurred to me, it's like, look, my big investment in my leadership is in myself.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That doesn't mean I'm not going to study and go and everything else. I am. But at the end of the day, I have to do it because,
Mm-hmm.
I go back to sports. Okay. I can tell you all day how to throw a Soto Makakomi, my favorite throw in judo. But believe me, until the first time you try to throw another 300-pound guy on a mat, full speed with a referee, okay, speaking in Japanese, you're not going to be able to do it unless you do it.
Uh-huh.
Now, guess how many times about I had to do that technique before I finally could do it under those conditions?
Mm-hmm.
About 10,000.
Wow.
God, God bless, Vince
Yeah.
Tamura, my old sensei here. He's unfortunately passed away a number of years ago, but Sensei Tamura would work with me for hours on one thing: how to turn.
Yeah.
Okay, how
Yeah.
to turn, and we would face the door in his dojo, and I would grip, and I'd have to get this elbow across my opponent's shoulder, and then I would have to turn, okay, about 240 degrees, so that I would get him up on I would get it over his shoulder, and I would get his hip on my hip to be able to throw him.
Wow.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's about how many times it took. So I
Yeah.
can tell you all day,
Right.
but until you do it, right? You know
Right.
what I mean? And I kind of compare that to getting your nose bloody.
Well, it is. Yeah. Yeah. Leaders, they're going to have bloody knuckles and bloody noses because leadership is really a contact sport. So yeah.
Big time, big time. Yeah, we go on forever. I lots of analogies here, but believe me, it's all very, very true. And
Yes.
but you got to do leadership. You can't
Right.
you study it. But you got to do it.
Yeah, and you got to pay the price. And there will be a price, just like everything in life. Yeah. So, John, tell our listeners how they can get in touch with you.
Well, probably the best way is just to text me.
Mm-hmm.
My cell phone, which is 972 area code 259-0875. 972-259-0875. Just send me a text,
Mm-hmm.
or you can send me a WhatsApp if you use WhatsApp. A lot of people use WhatsApp these days.
Yeah.
Same phone number. And just say, put Tracy in it or something so I know who you are.
Uh-huh.
And I'll respond to you,
Yeah, nice. He will. He's very good about that. And John, John's book is on our website on tremendousleadership.com. I think you can get it on Amazon. We can do bulk orders for your team or whatever you want. But that is a brilliant book. So brilliant. I wrote the foreword to it because I love it. I just love that you help people just take control of their futures through their through their finances and through what they do, loving their product. So, John, it's been an absolute pleasure. And what's next for you? When's the next book coming out?
The next book is being worked on. Should have it out hopefully by Labor Day.
Awesome.
Right? We never know in the publishing world, as we know, we never know what's going to happen, right?
You never know what's going to happen, but
Publishing, COVID world, we never sure, but the writing's been done. Actually, we've got all the chapters done. We've got to get the translation done down in Mexico for the Spanish.
Oh, yes.
We're incorporating, we have about 25 leaders with cameos in there, some very top level people, some top earners in the industry, some middle level earners in the industry, and then just some old friends that have been around and worked hard and built businesses. So we asked them 4 key questions. So that'll be in there. And the guy I wrote it with, a friend of mine in Toronto, Foster Owusu, who's got another great life story. His story is different than mine. He came from Ghana with nothing. Literally, he was an orphan. Came from Ghana to Toronto, of all places, if you can picture that, in the winter.
Wow.
And built a life, built a family, built a career, built a business. So it'll be good. And then after that, who knows,
Yeah. Love it. And yeah, for our listeners, John's book is also available in Spanish too. So awesome. All right, John. Well, thank you so much. Always a pleasure. And I love hearing your stories. I learned so much more about you, and you've really encouraged me as a leader. So thank you so much, John.
Likewise. Thank you, Tracy.
Thanks to our listeners. Have a tremendous rest of the day. Bye-bye. Okay.
Thank you for listening to Tremendous Leadership with Dr. Tracy Jones. Find out more about Dr. Jones at www.tremendousleadership.com. If you've been ignited by something you heard in this episode, let us know by leaving a review for Tremendous Leadership wherever you listen to podcasts, or by sending us a message through www.tremendousleadership.com.